Hey everyone, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and how soon we forget. How we forget that, George Lucas may be the father of Star Wars, but Marcia Lucas may have been its mother. In fact, the lore states that George didn't even really think about offing Obi-Wan and making him a Force ghost until Marcia gave him the idea. But now that we are in the current year of our Lord 2024, well, it is, ladies only and only current year ladies. Marcia, may have been a lady, but she was, you know, well, she wasn't there. That never happened. She doesn't count, you see, because she wasn't Disney Star Wars lady, and she wasn't telling men and making men feel uncomfortable. And yes, I do realize it has been pointed out that the making men feel uncomfortable quote was from a symposia, 8 years ago about honor killings. And yes, you should make men who decide to unalive female relatives or women they know for being attacked, you know, uncomfortable. Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. But the fact that this woman has absolutely no, no science fiction background, no Star Wars background, and her only movies have been documentaries gives her absolutely no chops in Star Wars. Uh, so let's continue because Marcia Lucas was there when it all started. Now, she didn't get the credit that maybe she deserved at the time, but this article was published in the year of our Lord, 2023. So we definitely wanted to tout lady bits and, lady power then, but we definitely wanted to forget about her and tout the newest lady bit achievement for Obeyed Shinoy today and forget about Marcia Lucas. George Lucas created Star Wars, but this person gave it heart. From Collider. From putting together battle scenes to killing characters when it comes to Star Wars, Marcia Lucas has done it all. It's no secret by now that editors are the true unsung heroes of cinema. After all, without editing, we wouldn't even have the movies as we know them today. Every now and then, there comes an editor that is more than just a transformer of a series of disconnected images into coherent artwork, and editors whose influence within the movie is so great that it's impossible to even conceive of the existence of such a film without that person. Think um Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skulls. This is what happens when, look, I love you, George Lucas, but when George Lucas is untethered, Indiana Jones and the Island of the Crystal Skulls happens. We decide to go and take Indiana Jones and go on a B science fiction, movie about crystal skull aliens and Russians. It just doesn't quite, and you decide to cast Shia LaBeouf before he became a Catholic. So he's full on insufferable. But I digress, let's continue. An editor whose influence within the movie is so great, oh, sorry, an editor like Marcia Lucas, who helped shape a cultural juggernaut that is Star Wars. If you would like to drink, there you are. Who is Marcia Lucas, you ask? Well, I don't blame you for not knowing, though her impact in the creation of Star Wars original trilogy has been more and more recognized over the course of the last few years. Unsung heroes are called unsung for a reason. In a nutshell, Marcia Lucas was George Lucas's wife from 1969 to 1983 and a member of the trio of editors responsible for putting together the very first Star Wars movie when it was just called Star Wars, not A New Hope. It was released in 1977, Alongside Richard Chew and Paul Hirsich, she won an Oscar for her work in the now classic space opera. However, to reduce Marcia Lucas's role in Star Wars universe like this feels wrong. In reality, Marcia Lucas is one of the main people all fans should thank for the sheer existence of Star Wars as we know it and love it now. From setting up some of the movie's most iconic scenes to direct inferences in story arcs, Marcia Lucas has done it all, and the Star Wars universe is better because of it. Now, not only that, but unlike Kathleen Kennedy, who may or may not have just been there because she was getting coffee for Steven Spielberg and her husband happened to be, Steven Spielberg's financier slash, producer. She also had plenty of experience editing before Star Wars. She had done Taxi Driver, Journey to the Pacific, I mean, Jaws. I mean, things that were actually politically successful, not coffee. And what if we put a woman in it? Make her lame. Born Marcia Lou Griffin, Lucas met George in 1967 when they were both working as apprentice editors on the United States Information Agency documentary Journey to the Pacific. At the time, George Lucas was a student at the University of Southern California, and Marcia, a film librarian at the Film Library. The two were working under Verna Fields, an accomplished editor who would receive an Academy Award for her work in Jaws in 1975. By 1969, Marcia and George were married. Marcia Lucas's love for cinema and her love for her husband first collided when she worked as an assistant editor in his debut film, the dystopian THX 1138, released in 1971, starring Robert Duvall. The movie tells the story of a man rebelling against the rigid norms of the extremely controlled society in which he lives. In 1973, Marcia was credited alongside Verna as the de facto editor and no assistant of Lucas's second film, the teenage romp American Graffiti. At first glance, one would think that Marcia Lucas's experience as an editor is restricted to her husband's films. However, one would be wrong. Marcia Lucas was one of the main editing room names in 1970s Hollywood, having worked with directors such as Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese. With Coppola, she worked as an assistant in 1969's The Rain People. With Scorsese, on the other hand, she collaborated on a series of movies between 1974 and 1977. The two first crossed paths when Scorsese was looking for a female editor for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. After that, Lucas also had responsibilities for supervising the editing process for Taxi Driver and New York, New York. In 1977, following her 3-year stint beside Scorsese, Marcia returned to work on one of George's films. However, that wasn't initially the plan. According to S.F. Gate, George Lucas didn't want his own career to obscure his wife's. Thus, he decided to hire another editor to work on Star Wars. That plan didn't quite work out. When the movie's first editor, John Gypsum, proved to be not such a great fit, Marcia stepped back into the game. At that time, this might seem like somewhat of a problem to Lucas. After all, no one likes to change editors in the middle of finishing a movie. However, time has proven that Marcia being brought into the project was indeed the right choice. For starters, Star Wars has a very distinct look with its many transitions that would feel tacky in any other movie. It's hard to imagine them being so present in the film if any of the editorial department members hadn't been the same. But most importantly, Marcia Lucas was also responsible for giving Star Wars its heart. Mark Hamill offers two great examples of how Marcia was essential to the general vibe of Star Wars in a 2005 interview to Film Freak Central. According to the actor that played Luke Skywalker, it was Marcia who ultimately decided to keep the good luck kiss between Luke and Leia. Okay, look, sibling love is weird, but she didn't know that they were going to be twins in the end, hopefully. Dear God. As well as the adorable scene of Chewbacca screaming at the tiny droid in the film. In Hamill's words, I know for a fact that Marcia Lucas was responsible for convincing him to keep that little kiss for luck before Carrie and I swing across the chasm in the first film. Oh, I don't like it. People laugh in the previews, she said. George, they're laughing because it's so sweet and unexpected, and her influence was such that if she wanted to keep it in, it was. When the little mouse robot comes up when Harrison and I are delivering Chewbacca to the prison and he roars at it and it screams, sort of, and runs away, George wanted to cut that and Marcia insisted that he keep it. She was really warm and the heart of those movies, a good person he could talk to, bounce ideas off of, and who would tell him when he was wrong. Marcia Lucas was also the person behind the amazing and unforgettable Battle of Yavin, in which the rebel pilots fight against and destroy the Death Star. In 1977, in an interview with Rolling Stone, George Lucas praises his then wife's dedication to the job. Quote, we had storyboards that we had taken from old movies, and we used the black and white footage of old World War II movies intercut with pilots talking and stuff, so you could edit the whole sequence in real time. My wife Marcia can normally cut a whole reel all in 10 minutes of film in 1 week. I think it took her 8 weeks to cut that battle. It was extremely complex. We had 40,000 feet of dialogue footage of pilots saying this and that. And she had to cull through all of that and put all the fighting in as well. Nobody has ever tried to interweave an actual plot story into a dogfight, and we were trying to do that. However successful or unsuccessful we were, the director stated. And indeed, Marcia did an amazing job with the whole info dumping thing during the battle scene. If you pay close enough attention, you can see all the information that's given to Luke and the Rebel base is coming from somewhere off screen. None of that dialogue is actually recorded out alongside those images. It's all done in editing. The way the tension is built with the constant jumps from the Death Star to the Rebel base, it's also the kind of work that can only be done in editing rooms. I did not know that. But then again, I am not a film student, nor do I know how to do any technically things. I barely know how to do StreamYard. And for that, I am working on it. In the same Rolling Stones interview, Lucas also revealed that it was Marcia that suggested he kill off Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. According to the director, he was struggling with the fact that the movie had no climax and no real stakes. The villains were like 10 pins. You get them into a gunfight and they just get knocked over, he said. Originally, Obi-Wan was supposed to have escaped Vader, leaving him, quote, standing there with egg on his face, which Lucas himself admits was dumb. Marcia, however, had a different thoughts for Kenobi. Quote, I was rewriting, I was struggling with that plot problem when my wife suggested that I kill off Ben, which she thought was a pretty outrageous idea, and I said, well, that's an interesting idea. I had been thinking about it, said Lucas. But did Marcia also come up with the idea of Obi-Wan becoming a Force ghost after his demise? Well, that's up for debate. To Rolling Stone, George Lucas claimed he and Guinness were the ones to come up with the concept of the Force ghost. However, in a 2022 interview to Vice TV series Icons Unearthed, Marcia said that she was the one that planted the idea on her husband's head. In the script, Obi-Wan was the rebel war room talking to Luke, and she says, but I said he can still say all the stuff he needs to say to Luke. I sort of pride myself on killing Obi-Wan Kenobi, she stated. You know, she's a little cheeky. I like it. What happened to Marcia Lucas after the release of Star Wars? Despite being an accomplished director, Marcia Lucas nearly stopped working after Star Wars and New York, New York came out in 1977, she did some uncredited editing in More American Graffiti and The Empire Strikes Back, and returned to the franchise officially in the 80s for Return of the Jedi. The last movie in the original trilogy was edited by Lucas, Sean Barton, and Dwayne Dunham. Marcia and George officially divorced in 1983, right after The Return of the Jedi came out. She hasn't worked in editing ever since. She also doesn't give many interviews, though a few years ago she did give her opinions about Disney's Star Wars. I wonder. She is also not a fan of the prequels and reportedly cried after watching Star Wars Episode 1 Phantom Menace because she didn't think it was very good. Could she have saved the prequels, though? Well, that's hard to tell. However, Hamill does seem to have a point in his opinions about about 2000's George in that Film Freak Central interview. Quote, he's in his own world. He's like William Randolph Hearst or Howard Hughes. He's created his own world he can live in all the time, the actor said. He's so exalted that no one tells him anything. Perhaps what he needed was a trustworthy editor by his side. Now, I have a controversial opinion. I actually somewhat liked, actually, as a political nerd and junkie, I loved all the political shenanigans that were going on in the prequel trilogy. I really did like it, but it's not for everyone. I completely understand. You know, it does have some god awful dialogue like I hate sand and, Hayden Christensen sort of just whining about, my teacher, doesn't think I'm working up to my potential and all that. And, rounding off the sequel, you have, you know, Disney's Star Wars. So you end up rooting for good old Sheevy Palpatine, and you're just like, "Meh." I mean, so it is a bit disheartening that, you can't really deal with all of that, what you had and what you didn't have. So now, what is interesting is that you also have this article written. Now, the hilarity, I do want to juxtapose this as soon as I can get the ads off, but stop screen and present, because here's the funny thing. So, Culture Slate put this out on July 5th. So, they are upset that Marcia Lucas was basically erased from history in their perspective. Now, this article basically goes on to lay out a lot of what I pretty much read to you from the other article, but I do like how, up until Disney trotted out Obey Shinoy, and said, girls, lady bit power away, and first woman of color director. Not that we didn't have Bryce um, Daniel Howard, the redheaded chick from, you know, and I want to say we've had the directors or the director for the Eternals, Michelle Yao, I think, also directed some Miss Marvels and I want to say Boba Fett episodes. So there have been female directors in Star Wars, but then we have to atomize it down even more to make Obey Shinoy the first female of color director. I mean, how many times do we have to redo the wheel? We've had women in Star Wars. Basically, there was a woman in Star Wars from the beginning. How dare they this is the same thing that's happening in movies currently. It's like we've got the first blank, we've got the first this, we've got the first that. Basically erasing and disregarding that we've had these things before. And they weren't a big deal because we didn't really put all emphasis on X, Y, and Z, factors. We just wanted good stories. So perhaps we will get back to good stories. I doubt it. Valiant Renegade is saying that if this is a super de duper flop, perhaps a new CEO, if one is picked, if Bob Iger doesn't stay on interminably and then make himself a head in the jar like Futurama, that Wall Street and fan and all sorts of different sectors will demand that there are changes in the Lucasfilm sector. I don't know. And now we've got a Mandalorian Dave Filoni movie, so I'm sure it will be all Ahsoka all the time. I have no idea. Grogu and Gagu. I'm just kidding. I'm sure Bo Katan and Grogu will have a great time. Although I'm sure Pedro Pascal will figure out how to make sure that he doesn't have a helmet on the entire time. Anywho, so I will see you guys in a little bit. Have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.